Explain why the U.S. women's
I saw this on this
teams.
application called TikTok. I'm pretty sure this guy's like a popular comedian. I also feel like, oh yeah, there we go. He did this as part one, and this part two. You know what I do hate though? People who say like for part two. Like, shut up. Just show us the whole thing. You got 3 minutes, and you made a 1 minute and 12-second TikTok here.
In all fairness,
and part two is 1 minute 15. You could have made this one video. You know it. And you say like for part two. Like these are nuts, bro. Anyway, it's actually a rather informative video, so I wanted to watch it because it's actually, you know, like I said, informative, and I'm just being redundant now.
Explain why the U.S. women's national team sued U.S. Soccer for sexist wage discrimination. Now, there are 2 reasons. 1, they are the most dominant force in women's soccer history. 2, they are f***ing idiots. I'm not here to bash women. Hope Solo has done that enough. I just want to clarify what's going on. The U.S. men's team, if you can even call them men, has...
Just, you know, like, I remember seeing this, and everybody whose defense was like, you know, men make more money. Even the shitty men's team, like, the industry itself makes more money, and there's, like, a minimum pay or something for people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're like, yeah, that's just what it is. Like, it's not that big of a deal.
It's an incentive-based contract. But there's more. They only get paid when they play. And by play, I mean get their shit pushed in by the third world. The U.S. women's team was offered a similar incentive-based contract. They turned it down. The women demanded guaranteed money instead. Then they went out and pillaged more foreign women than the Vikings and won another World Cup. So they did the math and realized they would have made more money if they had taken the original incentive-based contract. So they sued to change their contract and receive back pay for all the games they've already played. Obviously, the judge thought this was ridiculous and threw the case out immediately. You can't sue someone for giving you the contract you asked for. You also can't call someone sexist for giving you the contract you asked for.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. It's just fucking weird,
dude. You asked for a sexist contract. U.S. Soccer isn't oppressing you. You're oppressing you. Now, I understand it's shocking that women would break an agreement just because they're in a position to benefit financially, but that's exactly what happened here.
Jesus.
I want to explain why the...
In
all fairness, for the first time in the history of sports outside of stripping, women are more profitable than the men. Times are changing, people. Step out of the past, you bigots. Women are more successful than men at soccer. Men are more successful than women at being women.
Oh my god. Hey, do you think that, like, the best women's soccer team would beat the worst men's soccer team, though? Like, on all honesty? I'm just curious. Because I feel like one soccer team lost to 15-year-olds, boys at once. And that was funny. Remember that?
Welcome to 2020, man. I mean, Zim or Zer or whatever goofy shit you white kids made up because you feel guilty about not having any struggle in your life. Based on the money the women bring in, they should be making far more than the men, and I know how to make it happen. Easily. You pay the men what they're worth. Nothing. Zip. Zilch. Zero. Zer.
Well, I mean, if they're making money for the sport, even if they suck, like, they should make money. I don't understand.
This is sports socialism. They do nothing and get paid anyway. It's...
Well, okay, like, again, like, if they're part of the sport and they should get paid. Like imagine it was a third world country and they weren't getting paid anything because they sucked. All of a sudden, it would be like some kind of fucking racist nationalist bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, the issue, I find it bizarre that the subtext here is that men should, or rather is that, like, we should bring a particular group down instead of bringing the other group up. So it's like, yeah, don't pay the men, bring them down rather than strengthening the women and bringing them up. It just seems weird. Like, what the fuck?
Un-American. The men's soccer team is garbage and they should be treated as such. The men didn't even make it in the World Cup. We couldn't beat Panama. That's not even a country. That's a shortcut. I mean, we have 40 million Central American immigrants in this country. Are they just sending the ones that can't play soccer? When Trump said they're not sending their best, you gotta admit he was right. To me, it's clear. The women's team makes stars. They're undeniably the best in the world. So broads, take the money. Because I know one thing for certain. The future of American soccer is female.
Well, this was kind of an unnecessary part too. What I will say, though, is that it's an interesting conversation to have. Like, why did they take the guaranteed income? Why did they take that? And I think a lot of people, if you really wanted to talk about this, is that I think that women are generally, and I don't know if it's biological, probably more social, are generally encouraged to play it safer than men. It's actually one of the issues. Like when we talk about unequal pay, for instance, well, I guess this is what we're talking about anyway. But unequal pay, there are multiple components to not equal pay. Like first of all, once you normalize everything, the gender pay gap almost completely disappears. It goes from like 78 or 80 cents on the dollar for women and men to like 98 or 99 cents on the dollar. And that 98 to 99 cents on the dollar is generally up in like higher management fields. Where women don't really advocate for themselves as much. And part of that is because women are considered like bitches if they stand up for themselves, whereas men are considered like dominant and like, oh, good job, you know what I mean? And so there's a part here where a lot of times women don't advocate for themselves, I feel like maybe whether it's biological or it's like social or both, honestly, it's probably a mixture between both, social conditioning for women to try to be like less like, oh, stay quiet, stay in the corner kind of a thing. And part of the fact part of this, or a big factor, is that we need to teach women to be more dominant, more masculine, for lack of a better term. And this seems to be a case of that. Because look at the makeup industry. All the top earners are men. It's bizarre because women are the top consumers, you know? So this is an instance to me where I feel like really what happened is that they took the safe bet. They didn't take a calculated risk. And that's what needs to change more than anything else. More than anything else, that's what needs to change. So, like, if there is sexism, and this is how most of the time, like, this is the time where I think people don't understand, like, forms of, like, systemic oppression. They look at it and they think that it's very face value. They look at a problem and say, like, okay, the surface level of the problem is where we need to find. Usually it's the outcomes aspect, that's the problem. Like, oh, the outcome is bad. Women make less money than men, so that must mean that, like, we have to create equal outcomes and just pay women more. Well, that doesn't make sense. Where the problem really lies in the opportunity aspect, right? So it's like, oh, women make less than men. Well, yeah, men go towards higher paying jobs, partly probably biological, but also partly probably socially, like social suggestion. Like, we don't really suggest to women to be like biochem majors or technology majors, and we don't really suggest to men to be like sociology majors and etc. And so this is one of those situations. And it's like, okay, that's what we need to solve. What's the problem here? Is the problem that the women are making less money? Is that the sexist part, or is it the conditions that were created to make women advocate for less money? In this situation, I honestly feel like it was just a bad contract, probably bad lawyers or managers of the team that actually suggested that they should take a bad contract. So that's kind of my perspective on that whole thing. Yeah, and that's what feminism should really be fighting about, I feel like, more than anything else. You know, the social conditions that are set rather than like the outcome aspect. Look at the opportunity aspect, because I feel like that's much more, a much bigger focus, something that we need to focus on a lot more.